Hello. In this video I wanted to share a little bit about what we term the Ascension, and maybe give a more broad perspective of what we see it as, and a little bit of the journey that we took in getting there, just so you can have a little context of how we've arrived at some of these perspectives. As we had mentioned earlier, Gina and I have been walking a spiritual path for upwards of 10 years now, and had kind of broken free from the mainstream Christian perspective, at least as we saw it. And so during this process we heard a lot of amazing supernatural things from Spirit, and it broadened our perspective of what spirituality was, to the point where we honor and respect any path to God or any enlightenment as a person's individual path. And so we just really honor that, and really see a great value in how they each individual journeys to God. So as we had walked this path, we'd always had the understanding that something was coming, and back in 2008, 2009, there was a lot that was said about 2012, and as we see now, that those were steps, and that was releasing the floodgates of a higher dimension. And from what I've seen, it actually unlocked a door to raising our ascending to higher dimensions. And from the human perspective in 2012, the 3D perspective, there wasn't a lot that changed. So maybe there's even a little bit of disappointment for ourselves and some of those who journeyed with us, that there wasn't more that had happened, and we felt maybe let down a little bit. But as time has passed, and especially in the last 5-6 months, we're talking about the March, April of 2017, again, there's been a huge shift in our resonance and these amazing downloads that have been less frequent in the last 3 or 4 years, became more and more frequent. And there was, it will just connect to the Spirit, and could feel resonance, and look into people's pasts, and a lot of little medium work that I do, and all this stuff is amazing and supernatural. But as I saw that it was happening more consistent, I saw that a trend was developing. And so in looking around, we began to we found QHH, well, again, refound QHHT and Dolores Cannon. This is one of the books that we had read back in 2012, 2013, and came across her books and her work. Fascinating work, and really began to affirm a lot of the things that I had heard from Spirit. But it happened through hypnosis, and that was an interesting concept to me, who I'd never looked into hypnosis. But anyway, as we read her book, we began to realize, again, the last 3 or 4 months, that we were being called to something like that. And so we found a local person who does that, Allison Coe, who's a fellow light worker, we found out, and she's an amazing, talented QHHT therapist, I think is the right word. Anyway, she's very, very talented at what she does. And so both Gina and I had appointments through the end of May and the beginning of June 2017. We also found from her YouTube channel that she was hearing a lot of the same things about Ascension, this Ascension coming, and that others in her practice in the QHHT sessions were hearing words about this coming Ascension. Since this was taking place, we felt that it'd be a perfect place for us to ask the same questions of our higher self during our sessions. And it was in my session that I, rather than having a past life regression, I actually progressed forward and found myself as almost like attending a garden in a beautiful place. It felt and really began to take on shape as the Garden of Eden. and I began seeing children come. And then a little later, we moved forward in time and saw that there were adults that were there as well. But as more and more people came, that it was like that an entire civilization was moving into this garden that I had been tending. I saw the amazing connection that we have with the plants themselves, the beautiful way that the earth, the Gaia, and the plants themselves offered themselves as sustenance, and realized that just a huge amount of gratefulness to our plants, and literally just the entire earth, and see how it sustains and provides for this amazing experiment called humanity. So as I went through that forward life progression, I began seeing that there were wounded who came, and as those wounded came, that they were being harassed, and that those who came in the beginning, almost just showed up. There was no ship that went and got them or anything. They just kind of showed up, and then as time went, those who came were more and more battered and wounded and less healthy, but they made it, and those who were there in that garden before had assisted and healed and brought healing, to inner healing and outer healing, to those who came to the point where they were healthy, just as the rest of us were. Again, those children were a good part of that. And I noticed that we didn't parent the same way, that we didn't have cars because teleportation was a daily occurrence. We didn't work because telekinesis took care of all of the things we had to move and shift around, and all of that was done by telekinesis, that we didn't speak with words, we spoke with telepathy. And there was no miscommunication because you knew exactly what each person was saying, and the mood and the emotion that you were trying to convey, even through the words that you did use. So all these are amazing, beautiful things. And then as we had stopped in the forward life progression and just asked some amazing, pertinent questions from Spirit, I realized that I had actually moved forward in time at that time, and actually had seen what we were moving into as the new world. And what that world is literally a new dimension, a higher dimension from the one that we live within. And one of my greatest questions, and after I left that, is how are we going to move from this dimension and this world that we live in that seems so messed up and it's so despairing? There's so much pain and disharmony in our world. How are we moving from this, and is there another world being pulled apart from that world? And how are we as humans going to survive such a transition? What would that even look like? And maybe even a little bit more of the physical manifestation of it. How is the nitty-gritty of that actually going to work? And so these are really big questions that we watched a lot more YouTube videos and began to ask questions. But as I'm learning more and more, it's just so much easier just to go right to the Spirit and ask those questions. And it's just such a beautiful gift to be able to hear the Spirit convey these, because the words come in the most amazing love and affirmation. There's nothing that's ever said from condescending perspective or manipulative in any way. It's just the most affirming, loving, caring words and spirit that you've ever heard. So this one morning I woke up at 3 o'clock in the morning, and again at the same questions. This is a week ago. This would have been June, probably around June. Oh no, I'm sorry, July 10th. I would say July 9th. I had woke up with. I'm sorry, July 1st. I had woke up with those same questions, and I began to ask the Spirit. I began to watch YouTube videos on the Ascension to see if I could hear something new or learn something new. But I felt the Spirit stop me and say, "Hey, I'd like to talk to you. So if this is a good time." The Spirit's so gentle and unassuming, and so I was like, "Of course, yeah." I shut the videos off, and I just sat there, and I felt myself fall down into this trance, and I felt the Spirit speak amazing things to me. That we see this world, and this is what it came down to. That when I look at this world, and when we all look at this world through our 3D eyes, we live in a 3D body, we live in a 3D world. This is all that we've seen through these eyes. But we often hope to see spiritual things, auras, for example, and to see angels, and see even aliens and stuff that live in higher dimensions. But I realize that that's backwards. That we don't really need to try to see auras. We just generally need to change our perception and the eyes that we're looking with. We can exchange our 3D eyes for 5D and higher dimension eyes. So it again comes down to our perspective. The problem is we're trying and expecting to see these world changes in 3D, but that 3D view is very stuck with a consensual reality view of over 8 billion souls that hold this consensual reality view in place. So it's very difficult for us to break out of that consensual reality view that the rest of the world is holding in place. What we need to change is our perception. So what we are doing is raising the awareness, the perspective, which will trigger a change in our perception to see what has always been there. The 5D and the 4D is here just as even more real than the 3D that we live within. So don't try to see the shift from the 3D perspective, or you will just be disappointed. And that's what I realized, that I was looking to see us begin to float off and into some beautiful, palatial, beautiful world, like we're returning to the Garden of Eden. But our 3D eyes will only see what they've always seen. And what we do see are just the energy of love that is so slowed down that you perceive it as solid. You perceive it as a couch, and you perceive it as a wall, as a house that you live within. But that's all changing, and that's exciting news. This is like an alarm clock that's calling the entire world out of its sleep and into the reality of true life. For the first time in thousands of years, this is a historic event that is happening to an entire civilization at the same time, as opposed in the past where you'd have spiritual teachers, gurus maybe, who would find themselves moving up into a higher dimension, and they would float off. You've heard in the Bible of Enoch and Elijah, even Jesus and Moses, and those who just simply vanished. And I've realized that's completely plausible, especially as we move from the third dimension into the higher dimensions. From what the world would see, the person disappears, moves on, dies even, perhaps. But in the fifth dimension, you realize that you've just shifted dimensions, and life continues on in a more real and a more distinct and a beautiful, at the same time, a beautiful way. All the dreams that you've had in the 3D, let me say, come true even in a higher reality, in the higher dimensions. They literally do exist. All we're doing here is we're actually beginning to feel the dream, the seed of the dream, begin to emerge, and it's going to growing into our lives, and we'll actually be able to see it with our 5D eyes. The amazing answers to all the questions. Several detailed questions. Will we see aliens and alien ships suddenly? And the answer that I got back from the Spirit was, surprise and shock is a 3D phenomenon. As you progress spiritually, there are less surprises in your life. You come to almost expect things to happen before they do, and when they do, it simply confirms what you've already known. Remember that it's not possible to see outside of the dimension you exist within. You can't see fifth dimensional energies while existing and seeing with your 3D eyes. So in order to see alien ships or angels or auras and halos that exist in higher dimensions, there must be a dimensional shift to perceive them. And that is why we are focusing first on sending these light waves to Earth to raise the resonance of humanity. This does not conflict with our prime directive to not interfere with free will. We are simply sending the waves as a catalyst for a dimensional shift in awareness. Everything else will change in the timing of the individual. So I just see that, again, it's such an important thing for the spirit world, and even for aliens and civilizations, to not not break the prime directive rule that has been set in place. So it's a beautiful thing that's happening with love and grace. It's pulling us and drawing us to our higher reality. Exciting time to live. Thanks for watching.